The alarms blared through Station K7's pristine white corridors for the third time that day. Red lights flashed as researchers rushed past the large viewing windows that showed the spiral galaxy outside. Dr. Baekhyun's four-fingered hand trembled as he looked at the readings on his screen. "It's getting worse," he said, his scaled skin reflecting the emergency lights. "The quantum anomaly is growing faster than our calculations predicted." Dr. Sunme stood beside him, her silver eyes scanning through data streams faster than any organic being could. As the station's leading AI specialist, she had already run through 10 million possible solutions. None of them worked. "We need to think differently," she said, her voice calm despite the crisis. "Our standard approaches are failing." The Galactic Research Institute on Station K7 was the pride of the Allied systems. It housed the brightest minds from 50 different species. Yet now, all their combined knowledge couldn't solve the problem growing in the station's power core. The quantum anomaly had started small, just a tiny fluctuation in the core's energy output. But it grew like a cancer, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of space-time around the station. If it wasn't stopped, Station K7 would collapse into a quantum singularity, taking its 1,000 inhabitants with it. Dr. Baekhyun called an emergency meeting in the main conference room. The room buzzed with nervous energy as 30 of the station's top scientists gathered around the floating holographic display of the power core. "All our attempts to stabilize the anomaly have failed," he announced, his professional tone hiding his fear. "The containment fields are at maximum power, but they won't hold for more than 72 hours. A young researcher raised her hand. "What about the new compression algorithms from the Centauri system?" "Tried them," Sunmai replied. "The anomaly adapted and grew stronger." The room fell silent. These were the best scientists in the galaxy, yet they were helpless. The quiet was broken by Dr. Yoon, an elderly physicist with gray scales and wise eyes. "There might be one option we haven't considered," he said slowly, as if afraid of his own suggestion. "We could call in a human." The reaction was immediate. Several scientists gasped. Others started talking all at once. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as Deathworlders, creatures who evolved on a planet so dangerous that most species couldn't survive there for more than a few hours. A human. Here. Dr. Baekhyun's scales rippled with concern. "They're unpredictable. Dangerous." "Exactly," Dr. Yoon replied. "They think differently because they had to survive differently." "There's a human xenobiologist, Dr. Jaiho Park, who's done impressive work with quantum fields on Earth." Sunmi's silver eyes glowed brighter as she accessed the galactic database. "Dr. Jaiho's research is unusual, but his results are remarkable. He solved problems that were thought impossible." Dr. Baekhyun looked at the hologram of the growing anomaly. The containment field flickered ominously. They were running out of options, and more importantly, time. "Make the call," he finally said. "But this stays between us. If the station residents find out we're bringing a Deathworlder aboard." Sunmai was already sending the message. As the scientists left the conference room, she turned to Dr. Baekhyun. "Do you think a human can really help us?" He looked at the power core readings again. "At this point, Sunmai, I hope we live long enough to find out." Dr. Jaiho Park stepped out of the transport ship and onto Station K7's arrival deck. He carried only a small bag and wore a simple black uniform with Earth's patch on the shoulder. The station's lighter gravity made him feel bouncy, but he had trained for this. The welcome party consisted of just 3 people: Dr. Baekhyun, Dr. Sunmei, and 2 security guards who stood far back, their hands near their weapons. Jaiho pretended not to notice their nervous glances. "Welcome to Station K7, Dr. Park," Baekhyun said, trying to hide his unease. "We appreciate you coming on such short notice." Jaiho smiled, careful not to show too many teeth. He had studied alien cultural customs. "Thank you for having me. Though I wish it were under better circumstances." Sunmi stepped forward, her silver eyes scanning him with obvious curiosity. "Your heart rate is elevated, Dr. Park. Are you nervous?" "Actually, that's my normal heart rate," Jai-Ho explained. "Humans have higher baseline vital signs than most species. We're always ready to react." The security guards shifted uncomfortably at this reminder of human biology. Jai-Ho had seen this reaction before. To most galactic species, humans were walking contradictions, intelligent enough to join the galactic community, but physically built like apex predators. As they walked to the research section, other station residents quickly moved out of their way. Some even pressed themselves against the walls. Jai-Ho was used to this too. Earth was classified as a death world, a planet so hostile that most alien species considered it uninhabitable. "Your message mentioned a quantum anomaly," Jai-Ho said, changing the subject. "May I see the data?" They entered the main lab, where Sun Mi had brought up the holographic displays. Jai-Ho studied the swirling patterns of energy, his eyes narrowing as he noticed something unusual. "You've tried containing it with standard fields?" he asked. "Every known configuration," Baekhyun replied. "Nothing works. The anomaly adapts and grows stronger." Jai-Ho walked around the hologram, looking at it from different angles. Other researchers in the lab stopped their work to watch him. Some whispered among themselves. "Tell me about your worst attempt," Jai-Ho said suddenly. "What?" Baekhyun's scales rippled in confusion. "The solution that failed most dramatically." "Show me that data." Sun Mi pulled up the records. "This was 3 days ago. The containment field collapsed in seconds. We nearly lost the whole section." Jai-Ho watched the replay, his eyes lighting up. "That's it. That's what we need." "Need?" "It was a complete failure," Baekhyun protested. "Exactly." Jai-Ho turned to face them, excitement clear on his face. "Look how the anomaly reacted. It didn't just break through the field, it consumed it. It's not just growing, it's feeding on our attempts to stop it." The lab fell silent as the implications sank in. Sun Mi's eyes glowed brighter as she processed this new perspective. "That's why every solution makes it stronger," she said slowly. "We've been feeding it." "But how does this help us?" Baekhyun asked. "If we can't contain it, then we don't try to contain it," Jai-Ho finished. "On Earth, we have predators called tigers. Early humans didn't survive by building stronger cages. We survived by understanding how tigers hunt and using that knowledge against them." He turned back to the hologram. "This anomaly is hunting energy, so let's give it exactly what it wants, but on our terms." "That's incredibly dangerous," Baekhyun said. "The risk calculations." "With respect, Doctor," Jai-Ho interrupted. "I grew up on a planet where the air can freeze your lungs, where the ground can shake cities apart, and where invisible radiation can kill you slowly. Humans don't survive by avoiding risks. We survive by taking the right ones." Sun Mi looked at Baekhyun. "He's right. Our careful approach is failing. We need something different." Baekhyun studied Jai-Ho for a long moment. The human stood calm and confident, despite the whispers and stares around him. Finally, the alien scientist nodded. "Tell us what you need, Dr. Park." Jai-Ho smiled again, this time not hiding his teeth. "First, I need access to your power systems. And then, we're going to do something very human. We're going to set a trap." The main lab hummed with nervous energy as Jai-Ho worked. He had been studying the anomaly for 6 straight hours, much longer than the standard 2-hour work periods the station scientists were used to. Several staff members had suggested he take a break, but he had politely refused. "Don't worry," he told them. "Humans can focus for long periods when necessary. On Earth, we call it hyperfocus. It's how we solved many of our survival problems." Dr. Sun Mi watched him with growing interest. His approach was unlike anything she had seen before. Instead of using the lab's advanced computers, Jai-Ho had asked for simple tools: clear boards to write on, colored markers, and physical models of the station's power core. "Your methods are primitive," Dr. Baekhyun observed, watching Jai-ho draw diagrams by hand. Sometimes the old ways work best, Jai-ho replied, not taking his eyes off his work. When you rely too much on computers, you can miss things that seem obvious to human instincts. He stepped back from his drawings, which now covered 3 large boards. They showed the anomaly's growth patterns, but drawn in a way no one had considered before. Instead of tracking its energy signatures, Jai-ho had mapped it like a living thing. "Look here," he said, pointing to a pattern. "The anomaly doesn't just grow randomly. It hunts. See these tendrils of energy? They're like roots searching for water, or maybe more like a predator's whiskers sensing prey." Sun Li's silver eyes widened. "You're suggesting it's alive?" "Not exactly alive," Jai-ho explained. "But it behaves like something that evolved, something that adapted to survive and grow stronger." He paused, then added, "Something like humans." Dr. Baekhyun's scales flickered with surprise. "What do you mean?" Jai-ho walked to the station's main viewing window, looking out at the stars. On Earth, humans faced countless threats: predators, natural disasters, extreme weather. We survived because we learned to adapt. This anomaly does the same thing. Every time you try to contain it, it learns and gets stronger. He turned back to face them. But that's also its weakness. Like any living thing, it follows patterns. It has instincts, and instincts can be used against it. The station shuddered slightly, and new alarms began to sound. Sun Li quickly accessed the data streams. "The containment field is down to 40% efficiency," she reported. "We have less than 48 hours before total failure." Jai-ho nodded, as if he had expected this. He walked to his physical model of the power core, picking it up and turning it in his hands. "I need to see it," he said suddenly. "Not the hologram, not the readings. I need to see the actual core." The room fell silent. Dr. Baekhyun's scales paled. "The radiation levels near the core are too high, even with our best protection." "How high?" Jai-ho interrupted. "Lethal exposure in 30 minutes for most species," Sun Li answered. Jai-ho smiled. "Good thing I'm not most species. Earth's background radiation and our own technology accidents made humans more resistant to radiation than most galactic races. I can handle 40 minutes of exposure safely." "But the risk," Dr. Baekhyun started. "Is necessary," Jai-ho finished. "Sometimes you have to get close to understand your enemy. On Earth, we have scientists who study active volcanoes up close, others who dive into deep ocean trenches. We go where we need to go to solve the problem." Sun Li processed this information quickly. He's right about human radiation resistance. Their cellular repair mechanisms are remarkably efficient. Dr. Baekhyun looked from the failing containment readings to Jai-ho's determined face. The human stood calmly, despite proposing something that would kill most beings in the galaxy. "Very well," he said finally, "but you'll wear our best protection suit, and you'll come out the moment we tell you to." Jai-ho nodded. "Agreed. And I'll need both of you monitoring everything. If I'm right about this anomaly's behavior patterns, seeing it in person might show us exactly how to beat it." As the staff began preparing for his core inspection, Jai-ho made one final note on his diagrams. Sun Li caught a glimpse of what he wrote. "Know your enemy like you know yourself." "An Earth saying?" she asked. "Yes," Jai-ho replied, checking the protection suit's seals. "From a very old book about winning battles. And that's exactly what we're going to do." Jai-ho stepped out of the radiation chamber, removing his protection suit with steady hands. Despite just spending 35 minutes in radiation levels that would kill most species, he looked energized rather than exhausted. "Your vital signs are elevated but stable," Sun Li reported, scanning him. "Though I don't understand how you can be smiling after that exposure." "Adrenaline," Jai-ho explained. "It's a human survival chemical. Right now, my body thinks it's facing a challenge, so it's helping me stay sharp." He walked straight to his boards and began drawing new diagrams. and I know how to stop the anomaly. Dr. Baekhyun hurried over. You found something. Better than that. I found its hunger pattern. Jaeho's markers flew across the board as he drew. The anomaly doesn't just eat energy. It prefers certain flavors of it, like a picky predator. He drew 3 circles on the board. It loves stable energy, the kind you've been using in containment fields. That's why it grows stronger each time. But it completely ignores unstable energy patterns. It can't digest them. Sun Mi's eyes glowed brighter as she processed this information, like how some Earth predators avoid poisonous prey. Exactly. Jaeho pointed at her with his marker. We can use this. Instead of trying to cage it, we're going to give it indigestion. He explained his plan, drawing more diagrams as he spoke. The more he explained, the paler Dr. Baekhyun's scales became. That's... The alien scientist struggled for words. That's completely insane. You want to feed it radioactive plasma. Not just feed it, Jaeho said. We're going to make it overeat. On Earth, there's a defense mechanism some small animals use. They eat so much that they become too heavy to catch. We're going to do the same thing to the anomaly. The risk calculations for this are off the charts, Sun Mi reported. If we lose control of the plasma flow for even a second, then we'll have about 3 minutes to fix it, Jaeho finished, which is 2 minutes longer than if we do nothing and let the containment fields fail. A small crowd of scientists had gathered around them, listening. Jaeho noticed their worried faces and took a deep breath. Look, he said, I know this sounds dangerous. On Earth, we have a saying, desperate times call for desperate measures. But this isn't just desperation, it's strategy. The anomaly expects us to try to contain it. It's ready for that. It's not ready for us to basically give it food poisoning. Dr. Baekhyun studied the calculations Jaeho had written. The amount of plasma you're suggesting, we have to manually adjust the flow rates. The computers aren't designed for this kind of operation. I'll do it, Jaeho said simply. I've worked with similar systems on Earth. The control room's radiation shielding isn't designed for these levels, Sun Mi warned. Even with a protection suit, you'd be exposed to significant radiation. Jaeho shrugged. Then I'll work fast. The room fell silent. Dr. Baekhyun looked at the latest containment field readings, now down to 35% efficiency. Then he looked at Jaeho, this strange creature from a death world who faced lethal danger with calm determination. Why? He asked finally. Why take this risk for a station of aliens who fear you? Jaeho smiled, but this time it wasn't his careful, tooth-hiding smile. It was genuine, because that's what humans do. We see problems, and we fix them, not because we have to, but because we can. Sun Mi stepped forward. I'll help. I can process the data streams faster than anyone else. If something goes wrong, every second will count. Dr. Baekhyun's scales shifted colors as he made his decision. Very well, but we do this carefully, and we evacuate non-essential personnel first. Jaeho nodded and turned back to his diagrams. We'll need to modify the plasma injection system, and I'll need volunteers who can work in high radiation environments. I'll find them. Sun Mi said. There are 3 species on board with better radiation tolerance than most. Not as good as humans, but enough to help. Good, Jaeho said, already drawing new plans. Because we're about to teach this anomaly why picking a fight with a station protected by a human might be its last mistake. The control room felt different, with most of its screens dark and its usual staff evacuated. Jaeho sat at the main console, wearing the station's best radiation suit. Only Sun Mi and Dr. Baekhyun remained with him, along with 3 volunteers from radiation-resistant species. Containment field at 25% and falling, Sun Mi reported. We have less than 20 minutes before total failure. Jaeho's fingers flew across the controls. Starting plasma injection sequence. First wave in 3, 2, 1. The station trembled as radioactive plasma flowed into the quantum anomaly. On the main screen, they watched the energy patterns shift and swirl. It's working. Dr. Baekhyun's scales brightened. The anomaly is consuming the plasma. Don't celebrate yet, Jai-ho warned, his eyes fixed on the readings. That was just the appetizer. Now comes the main course. He increased the plasma flow. Warning lights flashed across every console. The station's computer began announcing alerts in multiple languages. Temperature in the core is reaching critical levels, one of the volunteers reported, their crystalline body glowing with stress. Good, Jai-ho said, surprising everyone. That means the anomaly is getting full. Sunmai, watch the energy pattern. Tell me when it starts to slow down. The AI specialist's silver eyes flickered rapidly. Energy consumption rate dropping by 2%, 5%, 8%. Now, Ji-ho pushed the controls to maximum. Final wave incoming. The station groaned like a living thing. Emergency lights flashed everywhere. In the core chamber, the quantum anomaly pulsed with impossible colors as it gorged itself on the radioactive plasma. Suddenly, all the screens went dark. Power failure in main systems, Sunmai announced, switching to emergency backup. Manual controls only, Jai-ho said, his voice steady despite the chaos. Just like camping on Earth. Like what? Dr. Baekhyun asked, but Jai-ho was already moving. The human grabbed a physical control lever, something the station hadn't needed to use in decades. His muscles strained as he pulled it, fighting against pressure that would have torn most species' arms off. The anomaly is reaching critical mass, Sunmai reported. Energy levels are... Wait, something's changing. On the emergency screens, they watched as the anomaly's pattern began to break down. Like a predator that had eaten too much, it was losing its shape. It's working. Jai-ho grinned, still holding the lever. It can't process this much unstable energy. It's getting sick. The station shuddered again, harder this time. One of the volunteers' crystal arms cracked from the vibration. Radiation levels in this room are exceeding safety limits, Sunmai warned. Even for humans. Just a little longer, Jai-ho grunted. His arms were shaking now, but he didn't let go of the lever. Dr. Baekhyun watched in amazement as the human continued working despite radiation levels that should have knocked him unconscious. How are you still functioning? On Earth, Jai-ho said through gritted teeth, we have a saying, mind over matter. If I don't mind the radiation, it doesn't matter. The anomaly's pattern spun faster and faster on the screen. Its usually smooth energy waves became jagged and broken. Energy consumption dropping rapidly, Sunmai reported. 90% decrease, 95%, 98%. With a flash that temporarily blinded everyone except Sunmai, the anomaly collapsed. The station's normal lights came back on. Warning signals stopped one by one. Jai-ho finally let go of the lever and sat down heavily. His face was pale, but he was still conscious. Quantum anomaly has been neutralized, Sunmai confirmed. Core readings returning to normal parameters. Did we win? One of the volunteers asked. Jai-ho wiped sweat from his face and gave a tired smile. We won. Turns out even quantum anomalies can get stomach aches. Dr. Baekhyun hurried over with a medical scanner. Your radiation exposure is well beyond safe limits. We need to get you to medical immediately. Worth it, Jai-ho said, letting them help him up. Besides, nothing some rest and Earth's natural radiation resistance won't fix. As they helped him toward the door, he looked back at the core readings one last time. You know what's funny? On Earth, we solve a lot of problems by making them bigger until they fall apart. Guess some solutions work anywhere in the galaxy. Sun's eyes glowed with what might have been amusement. Remind me never to invite humans to dinner. Your eating habits seem dangerous. 3 days after the quantum anomaly incident, Jai-ho sat in the station's medical bay, looking out at the stars. The radiation treatment had worked faster than expected. Another surprise about human biology that amazed the station's medical staff. Your recovery rate is remarkable, said Dr. Min-Ki, the chief medical officer, checking the readings. Most species would still be critically ill after that much exposure. Earth's background radiation made us tough, Jai-Ho explained. Our cells know how to repair radiation damage quickly. It's like having a really good maintenance team inside our bodies. The medical bay's door opened, and Dr. Baekhyun entered with Sun Mei. They carried what looked like official documents. The station council has finished their review of the incident, Dr. Baekhyun announced, his scales showing bright colors of excitement. They want to speak with you. Jai-Ho raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? On the contrary, Sun Mei said, her silver eyes glowing warmly. They're very interested in your methods. Your solution has changed how they think about problem solving. A few hours later, Jai-Ho stood before the station council. 12 representatives from different species. He noticed they didn't keep as much distance from him as before. The council leader, a tall being with flowing tendrils of light, spoke first. Dr. Jai-Ho Park, your actions saved Station K7 and its 1,000 inhabitants. But more importantly, you've shown us something valuable about human thinking. Jai-Ho listened as they explained how his approach had challenged their basic assumptions, using an anomaly's strength against it, working with dangerous materials hands-on, pushing through lethal conditions. These were all concepts that seemed reckless at first, but proved essential to success. We would like to offer you a permanent position here, the council leader said, as head of our new crisis response division. A murmur went through the room. Creating a new division was rare, especially for a human to lead. The position comes with full access to station resources, Dr. Baekhyun added quickly, and permission to implement human safety protocols alongside our standard procedures. Jai-Ho looked around the room. The faces that had shown fear just days ago now showed respect and curiosity. Even the security guards stood differently, alert but not nervous. I accept, he said simply. But I have one condition. The council leader's tendrils flickered. Yes. I want to train others in human problem-solving methods, not just how to handle crises, but how to think about problems differently. Jai-Ho smiled. Humans aren't the only ones who can learn to be adaptable. Sun Mei stepped forward. I've already volunteered to be the first student. My AI systems are particularly suited to learning new problem-solving approaches. As have I, Dr. Baekhyun added, his scales showing determination. My previous concerns about human methods were clearly misplaced. The council discussed briefly their various forms of communication, creating an interesting light show. Finally, they turned back to Jai-Ho. Agreed, the council leader said. We believe this exchange of knowledge will benefit everyone. Though we hope you'll understand if we start with the less dangerous human practices first. Jai-Ho laughed. Of course, we'll save the volcano studying and deep-sea exploration for later. As the meeting ended, Dr. Baekhyun walked with Jai-Ho back toward the medical bay. You know, the alien scientist said, I've been studying Earth's history since the incident. Your species has faced so many disasters and challenges. Yet you never gave up. You kept finding new ways to survive and solve problems. Jai-Ho nodded. That's because humans learned something important early on. There's usually a solution if you're willing to think differently enough. Sometimes the biggest danger is assuming something can't be done. Like assuming a Deathworlder couldn't save a station full of advanced aliens. Sun Mei asked, joining them. Exactly, Jai-Ho grinned. Though I hope the next crisis gives us a little more time to prepare. I'd like to show you some other human problem-solving methods, less dangerous ones. Less dangerous by human standards, or by galactic standards. Dr. Baekhyun asked suspiciously. Jai-Ho just smiled. The station felt different now, more like a place where new ideas could grow, where different species could learn from each other, where being from a death world wasn't a mark of fear, but a sign of unique potential. Let's just say, he replied, that humans have lots of interesting solutions to share. and most of them don't involve radioactive plasma at all. 6 months after the quantum anomaly incident, Station K7 had changed in ways nobody expected. The newly created Crisis Response Division, led by Jaiho, had become one of the most interesting places on the station. Today, he stood in its main training room, watching students from 12 different species work together on a problem. Remember, he called out, don't just think about what you can't do. Think about what you can do differently. The problem was simple but clever. A puzzle box that changed its locks every time someone tried to open it. Traditional methods wouldn't work. The students had to think like humans, adaptable, creative, and sometimes surprisingly simple in their solutions. Sunmei walked up beside him, her silver eyes taking in the scene. Their progress is remarkable. Yesterday, Group C solved their challenge using a method that even I hadn't considered. That's because they're learning to combine their natural abilities with human thinking, Jaiho said proudly. Look there. He pointed to where a crystalline being was working with a gas form entity. They were approaching their puzzle box from multiple angles, literally. The gas form student could see inside it while the crystalline one used their natural refraction to bend light around corners. Dr. Baekhyun entered the training room, his scales showing the calm colors of satisfaction. The council just finished their 6-month review, he announced. They're very impressed. 3 other stations have requested similar programs. Jaiho smiled. And what about the safety concerns? Not a single serious incident, Dr. Baekhyun admitted. Though I'm still not sure about your controlled failure exercises. Sometimes you have to let things go wrong to learn how to make them go right, Jaiho explained. That's how humans learn most of our survival skills. The station's internal communication system activated, and a familiar automated alert sounded. Attention. Unidentified energy signature detected in Sector 7. Crisis Response Division. Please respond. Jaiho's students immediately stopped their exercises, moving with practiced efficiency. This wasn't a drill. It was their first real emergency since the new division was created. Time to show what you've learned, Jaiho said to his team. Sunmei, what are we looking at? Her eyes flickered as she processed the data. Energy patterns similar to a solar flare, but artificially created. A ship's drive malfunction, most likely. Perfect test case, Jaiho said. He turned to his students. Who wants to suggest a solution first? A young alien with iridescent wings raised their appendage. The station's standard procedure would be to raise shields and wait for it to dissipate. Good. That's what the manual says. Now, what would a human solution look like? Another student, a being made of living crystal, spoke up. The energy has to go somewhere. Could we redirect it? Like how humans once used rivers to power their machines. Jaiho beamed. Now you're thinking like a Deathworlder. Sunmei, can we modify the station's deflector array to channel that energy into our reserve banks? Calculating now, she replied. Yes, with a 92% chance of success, though it would require manual adjustments to the array, which means someone has to go outside the station, Dr. Baekhyun added. In the middle of an energy storm, the room fell quiet. 6 months ago, such an idea would have seemed insane. Now, the students looked at each other, considering the challenge. I'll go, said the gas form student. My species can survive hard vacuum, and with the new protective gear Jaiho designed. I'll monitor from the control room, the crystalline student added. My natural ability to process light patterns will help track the energy flow. Jaiho watched with pride as his students organized themselves, each contributing their unique abilities to the solution. This was what he had hoped for, not just teaching them to solve problems, but helping them discover their own inner Deathworlder. Dr. Baekhyun's scales showed amazement. They're not even waiting for orders. They're just doing it. That's the real lesson humans had to share, Jaiho said. It's not about being the strongest or toughest. It's about being willing to try, to adapt, to work together in new ways. He smiled as his team moved into action. Every species has a little Deathworlder in them. Sometimes, they just need someone to help them find it. The station hummed with activity as the Crisis Response Division went to work. In the distance, the energy storm glowed like an artificial sun, but nobody on Station K7 was afraid anymore. They had learned something important. Sometimes the best solution isn't calling a Deathworlder. It's learning to think like one. Well, Jaiho said, checking his own protective gear, shall we go show the galaxy how Station K7 handles a crisis? The answering cheer from his students said it all.